Hello. Welcome to the show about stuff, the Stephen Davis Show.
Welcome to a podcast show about stuff. It's the show about stuff, the Stephen Davis Show. Here's your host, Stephen Davis.
Hello. Get your official products such as this marvelous t-shirt that I'm wearing, or this great coffee mug that I'm drinking out of, and many other products with the show about stuff, the Stephen Davis logo at https://www.zazzle.com/store/a-stuff-store, and make sure you get your 15% discount today. Hey, it's time for another episode of the show about stuff, the Stephen Davis Show. My guest today is Chris Owens, also known as Chris Old Dude. Chris is a former politician who served as a New York City Democratic district leader in Brooklyn, president of a district school board in Brooklyn, and he ran for Congress to replace his father, the late former Congressman Major Owens. But these days, Chris has changed careers to his passion from early in his life, that of music. 3 years ago, he released a critically well-received song video entitled George Floyd, Say Their Names. It earned accolades at over 150 film festivals worldwide. He's back with a new album entitled Preacherman Volume 1. It takes us on a journey from these disturbing times to eternal hope. Please welcome Chris Old Dude. Welcome, Chris.
Stephen, I'm doing fine. Thank you very much for having me on your show. We've known each other a really long time. And I had one opportunity to appear on this show before, and it was a pleasure. And now I get my own show, solo. Thank you.
And at the time, it was when you just first introduced Chris Old Dude.
That's right. That was 2020 or 2021.
2021, yes.
Yeah. And we had done a video for one of our songs, and it was George Floyd, Say Their Names, and it was doing really well and winning film festivals, and people were talking about it, and nobody knew who Chris Old Dude was. And hopefully they know a little bit more now, but we're getting ready to change that even more.
Fantastic. And I do thank you for thinking of me, of having you on my show. It's really great. I can't really believe that 4 years have gone by in terms of doing this show, because I really didn't intend on doing it no more than a couple of episodes.
See that? Good things just have to last. They can't stop.
Now, tell me, you were a politician, and you also worked for the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. So those are high-profile jobs. Not to say music is not high-profile, but it was in a different vein. What made you decide to take on your persona of Chris Old Dude and be in music?
As you alluded to, Stephen, I've been a public servant for many years. I believed in public service. I still do. I enjoyed public service, and it took me many different places. I worked in City Hall. I worked in nonprofit organizations. I did volunteer work by being a member of a school board and doing things like that. And then I ended up at the district attorney's office for 7 years under Ken Thompson and then Eric Gonzalez. And that was all very important stuff. It was important to me, particularly my last full-time job at the DA's office. I was helping folks coming home from prison, reentry work. And I was one of the first, if not the first, non-lawyers to earn the title of chief in a district attorney's office. And that was a great honor that Eric Gonzalez gave me, and I was very thankful for it. But all of that was in the context of what happened in between 2017 and 2021 when I retired, which was that my wife came down with cervical cancer. And little by little, our lives changed. She got sicker and sicker. She ended up passing away in January of 2019. And after that happened, the pandemic hadn't even started yet, and I was depressed. But after that happened, I had to start reevaluating my life and what was important. I still have two sons. The younger one still needs an adult in his life who's caring for him in an aggressive way. And I basically made the decision that I was going to retire from 9 to 5 work. And I told the district attorney that. He didn't believe me at first, but as we got closer to the date, which was April 12th, 2021, I made it clear I was definitely leaving. And as that happened in 2020, I had already decided that I was going to refocus on music. And to do that, I realized that there were just too many Chris Owenses out there in the world. Several of whom were involved with artistic endeavors, some of whom were athletes. And I said, you know what? I need to create another persona. Not that I have any objection to being Chris Owens. I don't. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of being Major Owens' son. I'm proud of being Ethel Owens' son. I'm proud to be the brother of my brothers and the father of my sons. But I realized that part of starting new meant sort of creating a new me, an alter ego of sorts, but just a person who was really just focused on music, because that's what I always wanted to do with my life. And while I have no regrets, I basically put it aside for a long period of time. So Chris Oldwood is me getting to be me, who I was as a kid, who I was when I fell in love with Elton John and the Jackson 5 and the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Funkadelic. That's who Chris Oldwood is. I know it's a weird mix, but that's me. And so that's why that emerged. And I've trademarked the name, by the way. Chris Oldwood is trademarked. And when I did the search, I found out there were no Chris Oldwoods in the United States doing any kind of music or arts related stuff. There are only 2 countries in the world where there were Chris Oldwoods that came up in a Google search. Guess which 2 countries? Guess which 2 countries they are.
Nigeria?
Yes, that's one of them. Ola Dude.
Oh, let me see.
Guess the other one.
Saudi Arabia.
No, Norway.
Norway, okay.
So the bottom line was I felt very comfortable establishing myself as Chris Oldwood in the US. And it's been fun. It's created a lot of laughs like we just had with some of my friends. I had one person, really smart guy, he's known me for years, had no idea that Chris Oldwood and Chris Owens were the same person for like the first 3 years of my work. And I was sending him emails all the time. And he just wasn't reading carefully. And then he says, "What? That's you?" It was great.
The good thing would have been, maybe he did, was that he said, "Hey, Chris, I just discovered this new artist, Chris Oldwood, and he's good."
Yes. I will honestly say no one has called me and said that yet. Which doesn't mean they don't think I'm good, but it just means they haven't confused me that much. But yeah, it's been funny.
Take us to some of your earlier musical journeys. What did you do musically as you were growing up?
Well, my mother was I was born with music. You're born with it or without it. And most people are born with it. Even people who think they're tone deaf or don't have rhythm, they have it. It's just not necessarily cultivated in their lives in the way it should be, which is one of the reasons why we need arts programs in education, because it helps children connect to who they really are in so many ways. But I started off really playing the recorder, the little recorder that everybody plays in class. I actually had recorder lessons that my mother gave me. And then she became my first piano teacher. And so I studied piano and recorder, and then I moved to the cello, and I studied cello for several years. I put the piano aside classically. I put it aside because I fell in love with Elton John, as I mentioned earlier, and started playing. I have a good ear. I started playing by ear, and I discovered the trick to learning all early Elton John songs, which is a certain chord progression, 4-1, that he uses over and over again in different positions on the piano. And once I figured that out, I was smoking. I was playing every Elton John song, and I was a chick magnet, the whole bit, which in junior high school, that was a big deal if you didn't play guitar. But then with the recorder, I just put the recorder aside. I did a lot of singing in choruses. I enjoyed that. I loved playing the cello, which is where I kept my connection to classical music. And I was in All City Orchestra for 2 years and enjoyed that. In fact, my brothers and I, all of us were in All City Orchestra. Jeffrey, my middle brother, who's also a well-known actor, was a very good viola player and became the principal violist in his last year with the All City Orchestra. But all of that was fun, and I didn't really take it seriously. And when I did try and take it seriously, my mother, of all people, discouraged me because I basically said, I think I want to be a musician. And she said, you can't do that because you have to make a living. You should be a lawyer. And
At least she said be a lawyer, because in certain neighborhoods they say go get a job at the post office.
my wife was
That's a steady job.
That's right. My wife was told that, and as she was growing up, she was told, get a job at the telephone company. You'll never have to worry. And while she didn't do that, she did go to college and get her master's and everything. She ended up at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which became a higher level equivalent of the telephone company and the post office. Because once you get in there and you get settled, you're there. You're not going anywhere unless you really decide to leave on your own or, unfortunately, due to illness. So there was that, and I'm thankful for that because she was always the rock. Sandra was always the rock in our family financially once we got married, because I was the guy who was the dreamer, chasing different interesting jobs and not making money for long periods of time. And that's what it was. One of the turning points for me musically, because I was in several bands in college, and that was fun too. That's where I really had my first experience playing with bands with really good musicians who played pop funk music. And it was the late 70s. Rap was just starting out, really hitting it. Earth, Wind, and Fire was big, etc. And we were playing all of that stuff, and that was great. I love that, and I'd love to do it again. But when my father passed away in 2013, it was October of 2013, actually. And shortly thereafter, in early November, Nelson Mandela passed away. And shortly thereafter, in early January, Pete Seeger passed away. Pete Seeger was a family friend. And the deaths of those three individuals had a big impact on me in terms of how I wanted to commit myself to doing community work. And being a cultural worker, in this case, a musician, singer, songwriter, had always been important to me, but it became even more. I had joined an organization back in the 80s called the People's Music Network for Songs of Freedom and Struggle. It's an organization which has members up and down the East Coast, some folks in other parts of the country, and some members in Europe and Australia as well. But they're all singer-songwriters who are committed to social justice and write wonderful songs about issues of the day. And I really enjoyed that and felt that was important to me. So I started a band with my brothers, which started in 2014 when we played at a series of memorial services for Pete Seeger, and went until 2017 when my wife got ill, and then everything slowed down and ended up stopping in 2018 because I just couldn't continue that. So I've done a lot of stuff, not the way other traditional musicians have, including the fact that the soprano recorder and now the tenor recorder are my solo instruments. Most people think about the flute, the sax, etc. I use the recorder, and I can play A Mean Stairway to Heaven.
Oh, Led Zeppelin. I was
Yes.
going to say, when you were doing Elton John, my favorite Elton John song was Benny and the Jets.
Which is definitely one of the most fun to do. And
Especially when they do that drum. Boom, boom, boom.
other than the piano solo, it's not that hard either.
Oh. Two things. Number one, I remember going to one of the concerts that you did with your brothers for your wife's birthday
Yes.
here in Brooklyn. And that was just really great. Sad occasion, but it was great. And the other thing is that music is soothes your soul. It helps you to think about things, particularly when I was younger. One of the songs that haunted me when I was younger, but I played it and I loved it. And I was going through that teenage stage of not knowing who you are or what you are. And the song that was really a big song was And When I Die by Laura Nero.
Yes, which was then redone by Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Yes. But it made you think about the importance of you because when you die, there'll be another child born to carry on. So I understood that, and it's just music was a lifesaver in some ways. Now, in your journey, what kind of music do you like to perform yourself?
Let me preface that answer by saying that music is the language of love. The vibrations that we get, and people make fun of folks who talk like this. Vibration, yeah, there is the vibration. The vibrations that emanate from musical tones resonate within our bodies, make us connect us to everything else in the universe. And music really is the language of the universe. It is the language of love. If there is a God, it is the language of the Lord in that regard. It is the way to communicate that connection that all of us want to feel, the comfort that we all want to feel, but don't always get to feel. And so when a song connects with you, in this case you mentioned And When I Die, I will admit I was a far more shallow young person than you were. For me, the song that really got me was Me and Mrs. Jones. There was something about that melody. I didn't even understand really what half the words meant, but that song was just one of the most beautiful ballads I ever.
I have a photograph. I used to play softball on the team with WWRL.
Okay.
And one of the teams we played just varying people. This was back in late 70s, late 70s. And we played against Philly International.
Okay.
And I have Billy Paul on that photo because I pitched against him.
Did you strike him out?
I picture, and then at the bottom of the photograph was Lou Rawls.
Oh wow. That would have been a lot of fun.
Oh,
So anyway, to answer your question, the type of stuff that stylistically, I've never been framed by any one genre. I was raised on classical and folk. I fell in love with classic rock because I listened to WABC and then the W.
Cousin Brucey was on NBC.
Well, Bruce Morrow was on ABC at one point,
Yeah.
Harry Harrison, and then I moved to WPLJ when I was in high school. So I was listening to a lot of classic rock, which really formed a lot of my thinking about songs and songwriting. But then as I came through high school and went into college, I fell in love with R&B in a new way and soul and funk because the Earth, Wind and Fire was hitting its stride. Prince was emerging. All these other artists, Average White Band, all these other artists, Funkadelic, were really coming up, and they were all exciting, and the sound was wonderful. And while I will freely admit that it was not the type of beat that I had been raised on, it wasn't second nature to me. It was something that I loved, and it ended up influencing how I started writing my music in general. However, most of the music I wrote in the early 80s after college was pretty much pop type ballads and a couple of upbeat songs. But I also started writing my political stuff after college as well. In fact, two of the songs that are on this album that I'm about to release, Preacherman Volume 1 is the title of it, but two of the songs are songs that were from 1983 and 1984. One was entitled If a Woman Had Made the World. The other is entitled Rainbow Soul. And If a Woman Had Made the World was really dedicated to my mom. And it basically said, if a woman had made the world, things would be different. Now, of course, we don't know if a woman made the world or not. Many people presume that a woman did not make the world. But the concept of thinking about how the world could be different was the point of the song. And it's a good song. And I'm very proud of the original version I recorded back in 1983, which you can find on my website. And I'm also proud of the new version, which is coming out now, which is a little bit more heavy duty dance oriented than the one that came out in 1983. And Rainbow Soul, which I wrote in 1984, was a song that was originally written to celebrate the Rainbow Coalition when Jesse Jackson ran for president in 1984. My father was leading, for those who don't know, my father was a congressman for 24 years, and prior to that, a state senator. And he was very involved with the Rainbow Coalition. He was very supportive of Jesse Jackson. And of course, Brooklyn would be one of those places where you didn't have just one group of people running to be Jesse Jackson delegates. You had multiple groups of people running to be Jesse Jackson delegates. So there were multiple Jesse Jackson slates running, which also helped to boost the turnout for him and helped him beat Al Gore in the New York primary that year. But the bottom line is I wrote that song to celebrate that movement. That song has evolved over time, and the version that you'll hear on the album is still has the gospel funky flavor, a little bit more intense. But now if you sing Rainbow Soul, people interpret it as something totally different because they're thinking that we're talking about the LGBTQ movement rather than the civil rights movement of Black and Latino folks that was taking place in 1984. I'm fine with whatever interpretation people want to bring to it. It doesn't bother me one way or the other. I'm happy if it's connecting people to the idea of we got to make good trouble and stay positive and keep moving forward. So in that kind of music.
I tell you an interesting story along those lines. I went to a concert in Forest Hills, and it was a concert, Diana Ross concert. And at the time, her big record was I'm Coming Out. But she didn't perform that song because she told the audience she didn't really practice and know the song well. The gay folks that were in the audience refused to leave. When the concert was over, they were breaking down the band. They refused to leave. She had to come back on the stage. They had to put all the equipment back up so that they could sing that song. And then that's when she realized, I'm coming out. That for them, that's what it meant. I'm coming out.
Oh, interesting. She didn't understand the anthemic power of that song.
But she embraced it because, hey, they buy her music. They coming out to her concert.
Yeah, which is very interesting because Donna Summer went in the opposite direction. Wow, that's a good story. Thanks for sharing.
Now, you mentioned your family relationship with Pete Seeger. Was he an influence to you?
First, we had been listening to Pete Seeger music ever since I was a baby. So, yes, he was an influence in the sense that the idea of connecting music to fun, whether it was kids' fun or whether it was getting messages out, was embodied by his music and his work. I, of course, was too young to fully understand the importance of him as a social cultural figure. I only learned more about that as I got older and met other people who had worked with him, had been influenced by him, etc. But he had come to our house for dinner once or twice, and he met my father in the mid 60s at a meeting in Manhattan at a school where I was attending as a kid. And there was some issue. I don't even know what the issue was, but there was an issue where different people were speaking out. And my father gave a presentation, and Pete gave a presentation. And after the presentations were over, he came over to my father and he said, I really like what you said. I want to get to know you better. How can we work together? And this was right before my father had decided to run for city council in Brooklyn. And so Pete actually came to Brooklyn and did a concert for my father, a fundraising concert for my father on Washington Avenue and the Washington Temple. Is it Dean or I forgot, it's a Dean or St. Mark's? No, it's not St. Mark's. It's Dean or Pacific. And unfortunately, My parents at that time, my father was basically new to politics. This was his very first campaign. He was beaten very badly by the incumbent, but my parents really didn't know how to run a fundraiser either. So there was a very low turnout, amazingly enough, a very low turnout. But that is one of my earliest memories of attending a concert and of hearing Pete Seeger live performing. I was 6 years old, 6.5, and that was a wonderful memory. And then a year or so later, he came to the house, maybe it was 3 years later, he came to the house for dinner before he did a concert at Brooklyn Academy of Music. And he was definitely an influence because the more you learned about what he'd gone through, having been silenced, we think we all stood up for Jimmy Kimmel and now we're standing up for Stephen Colbert, etc. But bottom line is Pete Seeger and many others were just, they were just silenced and killed by McCarthyism in terms of their ability to work. And despite all of that oppression, that fascist oppression that existed in this country then and is resurging now, Pete persevered and was able to make a living and continue doing good work. Not everybody could, but he was that compelling, that good. He connected people that strongly that he was able to persevere where others were unable to. And so he is definitely a hero. And for him, it was getting people to sing. And I feel the same way.
Just a side note, when you were talking about Pete Seeger and his inability to be able to get work because of being blacklisted, I thought of a setting that happened for your campaign when you were running for Congress, and we had the fundraiser at my house. And who was there? The son of somebody else that was blacklisted, Paul Robeson
Yes.
Jr. was there, and I have his picture on my phone. You and him hugging.
Yes. Yeah, Paul Robeson Jr. was great. I loved him. And yeah, there was this connection between people who felt a certain way about the world and intergenerationally felt a certain way about those who came before. The sacrifices Paul Robeson made and Pete Seeger made as colleagues and as allies were significant and made it possible for so many people who came after to speak freely, even if we feel we are oppressed now, which we are. We wouldn't even be where we are if those folks had not stood up. The Josh Whites, the Pete Seegers, the Paul Robesons, and so many others.
How do you see the role of a activist songwriter?
This is tricky. This is
Hey,
tricky.
I'm talking about today.
Yeah, no, I get it. This is tricky because I've had to wrestle with this a lot. We are speaking now at a time when Israel and Hamas have been engaged in a violent struggle for some 2 years, which is the most recent, most violent iteration of that struggle. But it's a struggle that goes back decades, half a century or more. And when you're figuring out your role as an artist, you have to figure out what's the most important aspect of your role. Is your role to simply fire people up? Is your role to get them to think critically? Is your role to get them to help them make their own decisions? Or is your role to guide them along a certain ideological path? And I think that many singer-songwriters, or I should say songwriters, I won't even talk about whether they sing or not, many songwriters are just expressing what they feel, which is genuine, it's honest, it's authentic, and it is what it is. And then there are others, and I tend to be more in this latter category, who want to express what we feel, but we want to express it in a way that helps somebody else see the light the way we see the light. Not in a dictatorial manner, but in a manner where someone can sit there and go, I never thought of it that way. And I'm going to think about this a little bit differently as I go forward. And if I can do that with many of my songs, not all of them will succeed and not all of them will be intended to do that, but most of them are. If I can do that with many of my songs, then I see myself as a successful songwriter. Obviously, if people take something I write to heart and are able to run with it in a more active way, that'll make me happy too. One of my new songs on the album is a song I co-wrote with Dr. Laura Ellen McKinney, who is the son of Reverend Samuel McKinney from Seattle, who was one of Dr. King's close allies and confidants. And Laura Ellen is a great mind of her in her own right, and she wrote the lyrics for the song called Turning Tables. And it's based on Christ going into the temple and turning tables. But the message is working people should not be poor, turn those tables. So the chorus is, working folks should not be poor, turn those tables. And if that is something that people take to heart and find strength and the ability to come together around a theme like that'll make me really happy.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Now, when you were doing a couple of years ago, George Floyd, say their names, what was the process in terms of creatively? How did that come about?
Like everyone else, I saw the video, the horrific video, and was shocked and devastated by the murder of George Floyd. And I felt, since I had just started writing again, I had just written a song about the pandemic, about my feelings about the pandemic. And I was like, how can I not write about this? This is just so important. So I wrote this song entitled George Floyd. And when I went to record it, which was during the pandemic, so we actually went to a studio up in Woodstock, New York, where the engineer threw all the cables out the window. He was inside in the studio, but he threw the cables out of the window, and we had microphones and mic cables spread out around his lawn so that we could safely distance ourselves. But we had small clusters around each microphone, like 6 microphones. And the instrumentalists were inside. They did their part. The vocalists who were singing their part did it outside. And I needed a lot of voices because there's chanting that takes place. Get down, lie down, I can't breathe. No justice, no peace. So we needed a lot of voices, and we couldn't all stand together in one place. So we had to spread it out, and then it had to be mixed and everything. But during the process of doing the recording, and thank God it was a beautiful day, I think it was June 14th of 2020. The weather was great. In the process of doing that, a young lady comes up to me who was doing background vocals, and she says, I really like this song. I think this is great. I think people really need to hear this. And if you're going to make a video for this song, I want to be part of that. And I looked at her. She was 18 years old. She was about to graduate from high school. Turns out she was the daughter of the recording engineer. And she had volunteered to sing, and I really didn't even know who she was. But I hadn't even thought of making a video. I really hadn't. I didn't know anything about making a video. I didn't know anything about film production. Still don't. But the bottom line is, I looked at her and I said, you know what? I said, I don't know anything about doing videos, but if you want to start putting something together, I will support you. I will do what I can to make it happen because I think it's a good idea. And so it was Alyssa, that was her name. It was Alyssa who came up with the idea of the video, put together the various pictures that were in the video. And then as we talked more, I came up with the idea of having a dance group do something in the video because it just seemed to me it was too static if all we had was a bunch of pictures. And so I recruited a woman in Brooklyn to pull together her very young dance troupe called the Angels of Transformation Dance Praise. They're praise dancers, and they're wonderful, and they've grown and they've strengthened, and they're outstanding. But they put something together in 24 hours, which we then recorded on the front of the Bed-Stuy Restoration Plaza. And that was done at 9 a.m. We didn't have a permit. We just showed up and did it. The cops didn't stop us. They looked, oh, okay. It was so early, there was not a lot of traffic, so we weren't blocking anybody. And then the editing took place. And that was really where the education came in, how to edit, how much it costs to use photos, all that kind of stuff. But the creative process of making the video was very different from the creative process of making the song. Because when I started writing the song, I knew I wanted to have the voices of the people chanting. I knew I wanted to have an undercurrent of John Coltrane's A Love Supreme, which is what the bass line is essentially doing in that song. If you listen to it, you hear that motif over and over again, boom, boom. It's not totally recognizable because there are other things going on. And I wanted to have a martial feel where people are marching. And so all those elements are in there, but it came to life when we put the video together. And a lot of it is accident. I'm sure that's not true for everybody when they do their videos. But for us, since it was the first time we'd ever done something like that, it was very much an accident. And it was a good accident. It worked out very well.
It is fun. That's why it's called the creative process.
Yes.
There's no set form for anything creative. It's what comes to your mind, and if you can make it into what you want, then that's it.
But that also can be a curse. For example, this debut album that I'm coming out with, and I use the word debut, okay? I've been doing music and writing songs for 40 to 45 years. This is my debut album. This is an album 45 years in the making. So the curse of the creative process is sometimes that you get caught up in the creativity and, oh, let's try this and, oh, let's try that. And you never get it done. You got to sometimes put your foot down and say, we got to get this part done. And if we have to make another version someday, we'll make another version someday. But this has to get done. And that's how I went into creating this album. I was not going to delay anymore because I don't take
that's still part of the creative process. You came to the conclusion that you wanted to get it out.
Yeah, that's true.
And you got it out.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. How was the creative process with this Preacherman album?
Preacherman Volume 1, and I really don't know why I thought of that title, but that is the title.
Hopefully, so why did you call it Preacherman?
It just seemed that the way these songs were lining up, it was a sermon, which can't be a boring sermon, but it's a sermon because the songs take you through a bit of a journey. In the early songs on the album, you'll hear songs that are basically bemoaning the bad things that are in the world and saying these bad things that are going on. We have choices to make. We've got to do the right thing. And by the time the album ends, it's a party, not because we're not still talking about the issues, but the feel of the music is much more upbeat and lively. And so people will be ending on a very upbeat and hopefully inspired note. So it's very much like a sermon as far as I was concerned.
No, it's more like a concept album, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It's a concept album in every way. I have so many social justice oriented songs. I had to really pick and choose which ones were going to be on the album. I know that my next album, if I have the opportunity to do another one, probably will be one that doesn't deal with social justice issues, so I can have an opportunity to get all my pop ballads out. But this one we had to start with a social justice album. And again, I have some songs that were written in the 80s. I've got some that were written much in the early 2000s and several that were written very recently, including one that was literally written just a few weeks ago. And it's fun. That part is fun, trying to figure out how to make the pieces work together to tell a story or to leave someone with a certain feeling when it's over. An album experience is so much different than what most people know with their music today. It's people our age who listen to albums. Young people don't listen.
I don't even know what an album is these days because there's you can't even get a CD.
My album is going to be both digital and CD. I almost was going to do vinyl, but the upfront cash needed to do that is not something I have right now. It would force me to make other changes, which I didn't want to make. So maybe one day it will be on vinyl as well, but it's going to be a downloadable digital album. It's an hour of music, an hour. And then there will be the CD version as well. But yes, most people don't really think about it. They think at most an EP, which is 3 or 4 songs. They don't think about an LP. I needed to think about this in the long form.
First of all, I can hear the introduction. Here's Chris Owens performing the Preacherman.
If we're in Madison Square Garden, maybe that will be the introduction, and I'll make sure you're the one who does it.
Oh, I will hold you to that.
But no,
Oh,
the album is going to start off actually with me borrowing the melody of "Oh Freedom" and putting a few slightly different words to that. A very short introduction, about 45 seconds long, and then we go into the first song, which is also a borrowed melody, because one of the things Pete Seeger and others in the folk world have done so effectively is they take traditional melodies and they put new words to them. And so I've taken what is normally sung as a Christmas carol and I have written new lyrics and entitled it The Choice. And that's the song that starts off the album, The Choice.
that's great. That's great. Do you have you already started your PR for this?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is that is going to be an evolutionary process. We have lists of radio stations we want to reach out to and writers and people we want to deal with. Of course, I have a very large mailing list that I'm going to reach out to as well. We will be putting out a press releases as we go through the process of moving from pre-order to actual download date. The pre-order date is October 9. The download date is November 1st. But the goal is to just build and keep building and pique curiosity. We are releasing one single, the Turning Tables song that I mentioned earlier, will be released on October 9th. That is actually the third song from this album that will be out. The first two were Orange Blues 24 and No Crowns for Clowns, which was released earlier this summer. And so Turning Tables is the third song from the album that will be released, and we will release one more before the album itself actually comes out. A ballad will be released. So we are starting the process of hyping things. There's a lot. People wonder how Taylor Swift got to be so big. She's got a team. She's got a team, a huge team of people, because this kind of work to promote your stuff effectively costs tons of money. You need a lot of money because you don't make a lot of money off of selling the music online. You have to sell it, which is why I'm selling my album directly from my website. You have to sell it in a form that's going to get you a return. Not to be rich. Yes, Taylor Swift's made money, but I don't expect to get rich off of my album at all. I just want to make enough money that I can make another album. You know what I'm saying? It's
You,
like
you,
that's what I'm
you
looking at.
know, I'm expecting in at the end of this month for this show $6.37.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how much I
Exactly.
made for the month of October, for the month of September. But you don't get the money until later on, and it's $6.37.
Right. And you've put in dozens and dozens of hours into preparing what you need to prepare and recording and then editing, etc. It's a lot of work, all of which you love to do because this is important to you. But in the end, you're also trying to figure out how do I do this and survive. Now, I am blessed. I am formally retired. I no longer work 9 to 5. I might have to get another job, but at the moment, I am retired, not working 9 to 5. I'm living off of savings and off of a small pension. And that is what's fueling this album. That's what's funding this album. I'm hoping that the album does well enough that my next album will be funded by the proceeds from this album. And if I'm able to do that, I will consider that to be a success. My goal is to sell 10,000 albums, and I'm selling them very cheap, by the way. Am I allowed to say how much I'm going to be selling?
Sure.
Okay. So the pre-order price for my album will be only $4.50, and the post pre-order price will be only $6. You can't buy an album's worth of material for $6 because for me, it's important to get the music out. I don't want cost to be a barrier to people hearing my music. If I can sell 10,000 albums at $4.50, I have made enough money to make another album. And that's basically what I'm looking for.
Have you already begun planning or being in contact with personal appearances around the country, around the world?
I don't, the short answer is no. We're trying to book interviews. You are, by the way, the first interview with Chris Oldwood about Preacherman Volume 1. You are the first. You are the pioneer. You are the groundbreaker and the icebreaker for this album. But we'll be trying to get radio interviews. We don't have the resources now to go running around making personal live appearances. And if money comes in, yes, then the strategy shifts. But right now, we'll do what we can with what we got.
Okay. Now, beyond old dude, what do you have planned in terms of your life?
Oh, really? There's another part of life? I definitely enjoy doing music. And I could do music all day if it was just doing music and not doing this business, the business side of things. I could just do music all day. But I'm hoping that I'm able to create more time to spend with my sons and with other family members and more with friends. One of the things that's happened as a result of the pandemic and as a result of the work just on this album for the past 4 to 6 months has been a little bit of isolation. I've got a lot of good people I know who I'd like to spend more time with before I'm no longer here on this earth. And you get wrapped up in what you're doing and time goes, and 2025 has disappeared. It just seems like yesterday that we were celebrating the new year, and now we're already in middle October. That's amazing. So I hope to just relax more, take in more natural beauty, take in more general entertainment. I will always be active supporting causes. I will certainly remain active in the fight against the oligarchical fascism that's coming our way. But it's all going to be centered around music in one form or another. I mean, that's just the way it is.
On this album, are all the songs just you singing, or is there any duets?
There are one, two, three. There are three duets. One is Turning Tables, which I just mentioned, where I'm duetting with a woman named Lindsay Wilson, who some of your listeners may know. Lindsay Wilson is a wonderful folk rock singer who writes incredible stuff of her own, and she's got a great voice, and I love singing with her. She also sang on another song of mine called White Lie, which was dedicated to the story of Carolyn Bryant, who was Emmett Till's accuser. So she duets with me on Turning Tables. On Orange Blues 24, I duet with Wendy Ward, who is a young woman I met back in the 80s, Black anesthesiologist who left the medical profession to basically pursue the type of healing she felt needed to take place. She's a wonderful songwriter and a great singer in her own right. So we duet on that in a way. And then the other duet, oh, actually, no, two more duets. If a Woman Had Made the World, I originally sang it in the 80s by myself. This one is a duet with a wonderful singer named Kiana Williams. Kiana Williams sang on a concert I did back in 2024. I was introduced to her voice. She's got a beautiful voice. So she sings with me on If a Woman Had Made the World. And then the last duet is We Will Get Through This, which is the only ballad on the album. And that is with a young woman named Yanitza Lee, who I also met through a concert, has a beautiful voice, voice, sweet disposition, and we sing that ballad together. So I was very conscious, not in how I wrote the songs, but in how I was producing them to try and provide opportunities for other voices to be heard. I'm not saying that every album that only features one person is boring, but I will say that I love my voice and I'm proud of it. And many people love my voice, but I don't think my voice is the be all and end all. And I think it's important to have diversity in your presentation because it makes the music that much more interesting. So yes, there are 4 duets out of the 10 songs.
Do you have a band that plays throughout the album, or is it you using just different things like Prince?
There is the band of one known as Chris Owens, because I write my music on the computer and because I'm able to orchestrate it the way I hear it in my head. I made a decision when I became Chris Oldwood. I made a very conscious decision to create my music the way I hear it in my head. For too long, I would write things and then I would have to settle. I would have to alter it to fit the group of live musicians that I was working with. So if you didn't have a 16-piece orchestra, you couldn't have all the different flavors that you wanted in your sound. If you didn't have the world's greatest lead guitarist, you weren't going to have a great lead guitar solo in the song, et cetera, et cetera. And I decided I'm not going to do that. I'm going to write this the way I want to hear it, the way I hear it in my head. And if that means I have to use the sounds that I've come up with on the computer for a lot of it, so be it. And when and if I have the good fortune to work with a live band, meaning I've gotten some kind of grant or something to pay everybody, because musicians have to get paid,
Really? I thought they did that for free.
Exactly. I will make sure that they are playing it the way I created it, rather than the other way around. So there are several live musicians other than me on this album. Many background vocalists, several guitarists who are playing lead guitar, a tenor saxophone player, drummer. There are a number of different people doing things, but there is no set band. And to the extent that there is no set band, that both gives me the freedom and the obligation to try and figure out how I would represent these songs live.
Okay. This has been such a wonderful discussion, and I am so honored to be the first interview for Chris Old Dude and Preacherman. It's coming out on Friday, October 9th, right?
Thursday, October 9th.
Thursday, October 9th. Oh, I'm sorry. Today's the 8th? No, today's the 7th.
7th, right.
That's right. Tomorrow.
Thursday the 9th is when we will be announcing the release, and when Turning Tables will be released, and pre-orders can start for the album, and the album itself will be released on November 1st.
What is the website?
The website is very easy. It's www.oldude, OLEDUDE.rocks, ROCKS. Olddude.rocks. That's the website where everything's going to be based out of there. But the single will also be on streaming services as well.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll put that on at the end of the show also.
Sure. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So that it's there. And I got the information that you sent me. So I'm going to use that as usually I do a blurb about who's going to be on and stuff, but I'm going to put that on it so that your preview songs are on it so that people can hear it at the same time.
Fine. And whatever else you need, let me know.
Okay. So that's it for the show about stuff, the Stephen Davis Show. This was a wonderful show.
Thank you for tuning in this week. Hope you enjoyed this show about stuff. See you next time.